Hi, this is Allyson Lewis with the 7-Minute Life, and today you are in for a treat. I have with us one of the very beginning parts of the professional productivity and organizational people in the world. Now, I am a time management strategist. I've been considered an expert. I've written 3 books, and I believe I can really help people in time management and productivity. But one of the areas I personally struggle with most and waste a lot of time on is the clutter that I have around me. And today I have with me Barbara Hemphill, who is absolutely one of the premier experts. And I would like to introduce Barbara. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great, Allison. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about really some of your credentials and what it means to be a productivity expert, and what do you really call yourself?
I call myself a productivity specialist, and I started this business in 1978. I was in New York City. I lived on the Upper West Side in Manhattan. My husband and I had lived in India and adopted 3 orphan children, one of whom was mentally disabled. And he worked for a nonprofit, and so we needed additional money in our family. But I needed flexibility to be able to take care of my children at the same time. And I decided the best way to have flexibility in a job was to create a job by listening to what other people complained about that I knew how to fix, that they would pay me for. And as I sat on the playground with my kids, I would hear things like, we haven't eaten off the dining room table in a month because it's piled full of papers, or we had to file an extension of our income taxes because I couldn't find the receipts, or I've just been fighting with my kids about the clutter in their room, or fighting with my husband about the junk he dumps on the counter and I can't cook dinner. And usually that was paper. And I thought, they didn't have my mother. I grew up on a farm in Nebraska. Lived in the second floor of a tenant farmhouse, and my mother and my father both were very organized people, and we did things in a very organized way. The house wasn't always neat because there was only 3 rooms and there were 4 of us, and so sometimes it was kind of crowded. But if the phone rang and the preacher was coming, it only took a few seconds to get everything put away where it belonged, which is really one of the keys. So I ran an ad in a New York City newspaper called Wisdom's Child, and that ad read, "Organizing consultant can help you make better use of time and space." Like a lot of entrepreneurs, I got off to a rough start. There were 3 crank calls, but the 4th call was from a widow, 58 years old, whose husband was an attorney, and he had died like the shoemaker with no kids. He was the attorney who had died leaving all of his papers in bad order. He had piles of paper at his office and at his home, and she had not a clue what to do. And she didn't know that she was my first client, and I didn't tell her. I just went in and started digging through the papers and saying, okay, I need to talk to the stockbroker about this and the accountant about this, and just dug through the papers. And that's how the business started. I spoke wherever I could get a platform, the PTA, church groups, garden clubs, anywhere. And then we moved to Washington, D.C. And I went to the Small Business Administration to ask them to help me start my organizing business in Washington. And they laughed me out of the room. They said, "You are crazy. Nobody pays for organizing services. You better figure out something else to do." But I didn't believe them because I knew it was a problem, and I knew it was a problem that really affected so many people at so many levels. And so I called the editor of the Washingtonian magazine. And I said, "I've just moved here from New York, and I have a service that I think would be of interest to your readers," because I knew readers of the Washingtonian had money. And she was fascinated. And fortunately, she never asked me, "How long have you been in business?" or "How many clients have you had?" And I didn't tell her. I just focused on what it was that I knew how to do. And I very quickly learned that paper was the #1 organizing challenge in the American household. That we could do closets and cupboards and kitchens, But the paper was the thing that caused the most arguments, and frankly still does in most households. You know, it's where's this bill, or the kids asking where's this piece of paper that needs to go to school, or where's the papers we need to refinance our mortgage, etc. And the question that people always asked me was, how long do you keep? You know, in those days, in the early 80s, it was especially bank statements because they were big and bulky. And it was like, okay, how long do you keep these things? And I went to the library to get a book on the subject, and there wasn't one. And I thought, this is amazing. Because it doesn't make any difference if you earn $18,000 a year or $800,000 a year. You still need to know the answer to how long do you keep insurance policies and credit card receipts, and what do you do with children's artwork and all of that kind of stuff. And so in 1988, I published a book with Dodd Mead called Taming the Paper Tiger. And that was what really launched this career and ultimately got me the nickname of the Paper Tiger Lady.
Well, I want to stop you right there because I completely agree. I see it all over. And in fact, just last weekend, I had a file that I was looking for, and I bet I spent over an hour looking for it. I never did find it. And the next day, it was sitting underneath a file directly on my desk. And I had wasted an hour of my life, and that hour can never be reclaimed. But what was more painful to me was the frustration I felt looking for that. So I know that we have about 25 minutes left, and I really do believe I want to focus on, if I come into my office and I sit down at my desk and I look to the left of me and I look to the right of me and I see the workspace on my desk in front of me, and I look behind me and I see my credenza, I want you to tell me what I have heard. You have something called the Magic Six, and I would really like you to spend the next several minutes talking about the Magic Six, and then I would like to interrupt you with about 5 minutes left and let us conclude this with what actions people can take. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Barbara. Is there something that people can really do to sit down at their desk and find peace rather than clutter, chaos, and disorganization?
Oh, absolutely. But I want to stop before we talk about the Magic Six, which is really important. But there's something else that I believe is even more important. And this is what I've learned in the 35 plus years I've been in this business. For the first 20 years, I focused on paper and physical clutter. And then I was literally drugged into helping people organize digital clutter because I wasn't really motivated to do it because I had my papers very well organized. I had a client who had 35,000 files, and we could still find any file she needed in 5 seconds. So I had that down perfectly. I didn't have a space problem. So I really wasn't motivated to deal with digital. But if you're going to be in business, you have to respond to what your clients need, and my clients were struggling with email and electronic files. So then for the next 10 years, I dealt with paper because the paper still existed. It still does today. And then we added digital on top of that. But in the last couple of years, I've discovered something that I believe is my reason for existence. And that is that while physical and digital clutter is a problem, it is really a symptom of the problem. And the real problem is what I call spiritual and emotional clutter. Spiritual clutter is not being clear about your purpose on this earth. I believe that every human being was created for a specific reason. And emotional clutter comes when you know what that reason is, or you think you know what it is, but you don't go for it because the messages in your head say, oh, you could never do that. You're not smart enough to do that. You can't afford to do that, etc., etc. And here's what's interesting. When you eliminate the spiritual and the emotional clutter, the physical and the digital clutter will literally fall away. But the problem is that many, many people do not know what their purpose for living is. I was in that situation once. I was married, and after 14 years, my husband decided he didn't want to be married. We, at that point, lived in the Washington, D.C. area. We had these 3 children. I was so happy. I loved my life. No one in my family had ever been divorced, and I was absolutely devastated. And I really didn't know what to do. And I went to a counselor, and a counselor said to me, all right, you have a blank slate. What do you want your life to be? And I answered, I don't have a clue. I was Mrs. Tom, and I really liked being Mrs. Tom. I do not know. And she made a statement which was life-changing for me and which I've used for so many clients since then. And what she said to me was, let's start with what you don't want.
Wow.
Well, that's kind of how I approach clutter. Lots of times people they have a lot of stuff and it just seems kind of overwhelming and they're trying to make it into a big project. And so what we start when we're dealing with the clutter, and when we would sit down at your desk, Allyson, or at anybody's desk, we would start, we wouldn't do any sorting, we wouldn't do anything except we'd say, what is it here that I don't want? Research shows that 80% of what we keep, we never use. Now, the question we've got to address is, why is it so difficult for so many people to let go of things? Well, I wrote a book a number of years ago called Love It or Lose It, Living Clutter-Free Forever. And in the research for that book, I discovered that when I came across someone that we often refer to as a pack rat, if I ask enough questions of that person, what I would find out that that person had experienced a severe emotional loss in their life. Sometimes it was something like the death of a family member, living through the depression, the loss of a dream. I think about a gentleman I worked with who said, my clutter started at age 55 when I lost the job I loved and never found another one to replace it. Because when you're not clear about what your purpose is and what you're doing, then you have nothing by which to measure whether something is clutter. So one of the pieces of advice that I would give anyone immediately that you can begin to implement is simply, as you go through your daily life, whether you're in your closet or your email or your kitchen or your garage or your files, wherever it is, you just look at that item and you say, does this help me accomplish my work or enjoy my life? And if the answer is no, it's clutter.
Barbara, just those statements that you've just made, I'm just sitting here going, wow. I never had thought that physical clutter and what was sitting on my desk were so tied to the person that I am and the things that are going around me and how they make a difference in what we do. And I think the statement that you said to me is that when you went to the counselor, they said to you, you have a blank slate. What do you want to do? And I think for the majority of people listening to this, that can be a life-changing question that you've just proposed to them. And then having the freedom to respond, your counselor said something with such wisdom. Let's start with what you don't want. And so I'm going to turn it back over to you because I know you were going to move into kind of the next phase, but I can already see that there are a lot of things in my life that I don't want, that aren't in alignment, and I can absolutely give myself some kind of permission now to move away from that. So I'm turning the camera back to you. Okay, Barbara, what's the next step?
Well, one of the things I believe very strongly is that in order for people to organize their desk, which is what we're talking about here, there are some principles. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people who call themselves organizing consultants, and they come in and they get hired and they go in and they sort things and color code things and label things and file things, and they leave and everything looks just beautiful, and then 6 months later it looks the same again. And that always makes me very sad, because several things happen. Number one, the consultant doesn't end up with a great testimonial, which of course is one of the great things to give you a good business. But the saddest thing is that the client feels like, I am so bad that even a professional can't help me. But the problem was that that paper is a symptom, it's not the problem. So we want to put into use or to practice here some principles. And one of the very important principles that's essential is today's mail is tomorrow's pile. Often when people, they get tired of their desk and they're tired of the mess, so they go in and they just start throwing away the old stuff. Well, that's fine, except that while you're throwing away the old stuff, what's happening? The new stuff is coming in, which means you are never going to win. You can be using that process for the rest of your life, and you're never going to win. And it's getting more and more difficult now because the amount of stuff that's coming in, both in physical and in digital, is absolutely overwhelming. So when I go in to work with someone in one of our most popular services, and I say our because I have a group of some 40 consultants that are trained to use the processes that we use. They're called Certified Productive Environment Specialists. And one of our most popular services, which can be done live, it can be done in someone's office, in their home, or it can be done virtually, and it's called an 8-hour miracle. And an 8-hour miracle is an organizing intervention. And we have done this thousands of times in all sorts of settings. And when we go in to do that, either virtually or live, we ignore everything you've done in the past. And we start by setting up what you referred to earlier in our call, the Magic 6. The Magic 6 came out of a number of years ago in the early 90s. I was a partner with a software company. And prior to releasing that software, I organized 200 individual people. And while I believe that organizing is an art, by the way, let me just dispel any myths that people would think that I'm a naturally organized person. I, like you, have been diagnosed with ADHD. I'm a musician by training, an artist. I love the big picture, but I get really bogged down in the details. I love to start things, but finishing them can be a real challenge. So everything you're hearing me talk about doesn't come from my natural instincts. It comes from what I had to learn in order to survive. So when I did these 200 people, I believe that organizing is an art. People often say to me, what should I do? And I will say, that is the wrong question. The question is, what will you do? That's what we have to figure out. And so I believe that organizing and productivity is an art form, and so we're going to start over. But I knew that there were some things that were, I had a feeling at least, that there were some things that were not negotiable, that some things had to be in place, that if you were going to manage your paper, manage your digital information so you could accomplish your work and enjoy your life, you were going to have some things. And it was out of that that came the Magic 6. So Allyson, you asked me to describe what the office would look like, and I'm going to describe that to you right now. Number one is what I call the desktop files. The 3 that are non-negotiable in virtually every situation. I might be able to think of one exception, but that would even be hard. Those are the tools on top of your desk. They are the desktop trays, and in, out, and file. In means I haven't looked at it yet. Out means it needs to go someplace else. It needs to go to another room. It needs to go to the post office. I need to give it to someone. And file means it needs to go in the file cabinet. Now let me just stop here and say that my business for all these 35 years has been based on 4 words. Clutter is postponed decisions. Now I learned that from clothes closets. Clothes closets fill up because we haven't decided whether you're going to lose the 10 pounds you need to lose to get back into that size smaller suit again, or whether the exercise equipment that looks so great on Home Shopping Network is ever going to get used, or the candlesticks you got from Aunt Sally that you really love, but they're not really your style, but if she came for Thanksgiving dinner, she would be so happy if you had them on the table. And it's the same true with paper. You sit down at your desk and you say, okay, today's the day I'm going to clean this up, and you think of any number of reasons why the day is not a day to deal with this piece of paper, and you move the papers one by one from one side of the desk to the other. And the same thing is true with email. So it's not enough to make decisions. You have to make decisions, and there's really only 3 decisions you can make about any piece of paper: file, act, or toss. So one of the ways I help people remember it is, if you want to eliminate the fat from your desk, those are your 3 choices, the 3 decisions you have to make for every piece of paper. It's either file, which means I don't know if I'll need it, but I don't have the guts to throw it away, or act, which means I need to do it, which means I have to identify what do I need to do and when. And 3 is, toss. I really don't need it, so I can toss it, shred it, or recycle it. So let's go back to the Magic 6. The Magic 6 is a way, gives you a system. I use the acronym for system of saving, use, space, time, energy, and money. So this Magic 6 is a system. So number 1 are the desktop trays: in, out, and file. Number 2 is wastebasket, recycle, and shred. Number 3, your calendar. Whenever someone has a messy desk, one of the first things I want to know is what kind of calendar to use and where do you capture your to-do lists, because that's very, very important. And it could be paper, it could be electronic, or it might be both. That's what I use. Number 4 is your contact management system. One of the reasons that there's lots of paper on a desk is there are business cards that you collected in meetings that sometimes you don't even remember where you got them by this time. There are notes you scratched on napkins or envelopes. There are Post-it notes all over the place, and they have contact information. So it's very important that you have a contact management system of some kind. In the old days, it was a Rolodex. Now, for most people, it needs to be electronic. Then number 4, or number 5, is what I call action files. And growing up on the farm, my daddy used to have the phrase, where the rubber meets the road. Well, that's what number 5 is. It's action files where the rubber meets the road. And action files mean these are papers where the ball is in my court to get them done. And there are 3 ways you can organize action files. You can do them by date. I have a tool that I use called Swift File, which is a desktop filing system with 31 files for the current days of the month and 12 files for the 12 months of the year. The second way that an action file can be organized is by type of action. So an example for that would be a file that said data entry. So when you come back from a meeting and you have a bunch of business cards, instead of just throwing them on the desk or sticking them in the drawer, you put them in that file that's called data entry. And then every so often, once a week, you do the data entry. Or if you're really clever, you'll find some child in the neighborhood who would be thrilled to earn $5 a week, and you pay them to do it. And then the third way that you organize action files is by the name of the project or the research you're doing or whatever else it is. So the action files are number 5. And then number 6 are reference files, which is everything else. So the idea, Allison, is when you're sitting in your chair, and you specifically asked me to address, okay, I'm sitting here in my chair, you want to be able to reach all of those 6 items without moving. Now, let me mention just one other thing that's really important. Some of the people listening may not have a job. This may be the papers that they have at home, or maybe they have a job and they have an office and it's fine, but the papers at home are terrible. I believe that every household needs what I call the home office for the business of life. And that is a place where the Magic 6 is, where you pay bills and deal with consumer issues and take care of kids and schedules and all those sorts of things. Here is what is essential about that home office of the business of life. It must be a place you like to be, because many of the things you're doing are things you don't particularly like doing. And so if you're trying to do them in a place you don't like being, it's not likely to happen. So my favorite story about that was a number of years ago, I was working with a woman who had actually traveled with one of our first ladies. She had a condo in Washington, D.C. It was a beautiful condo full of gorgeous things she'd gotten from all around the world. But all throughout the condo were little piles of paper. They were on the kitchen table, the dining room table, the bay window, beside the TV, beside the bed. And she had heard me give a speech and said, okay, I'm sick of this. Will you come in and help me fix it? So I went to her condo, and one of the things I discovered early on was a front hall closet. I opened the front hall closet, and the vacuum cleaner hose fell out. And after discussion, realized she didn't really need it because she had a cleaning service. She didn't even use the vacuum cleaner. And there were 8 coats, but she really only wore 2 of them. And then there was a bunch of stuff that was left by house guests that she was always going to return, but by this time she didn't even remember who belonged to what. So we took out the hanging rod, we put in a counter-high shelf, put in a 2-drawer filing cabinet, put in a stool, put hot files on the door, put lighting in it. But the thing that made her home office with the business life work was a radio. Because when she came home from work, that was the same time one of her favorite radio programs was on called All Things Considered. And so she was willing to take the mail out of the mailbox in the lobby, bring it in, open the front hall closet, pull out the stool, sit down, flip on the radio, and now she was willing to take the 30 minutes to get things sorted, to do the things that she could. And that brings me back to what I said at the beginning. It's not what should you do, but it's what you will do.
Oh my goodness. I am floored by what I've learned today. Now, I would love it sometime to actually begin to do some of this virtual work in maybe 15 or 30 minutes, using me as a guinea pig because I am one of those people. I know we have just a few minutes left, and I will have this transcribed so that people can not only watch this, but they'll be able to print it off. I want you to leave people from what they've learned today with what are the first 3 things that they should do if they've just watched this, their heart's pumping with excitement, just like mine is. What are the first 3 things that you would encourage them to do without being overwhelmed, Barbara?
Well, the first thing is to look at your mental attitude. You know, if this is something that, if this managing paper is something that you've struggled with for a long time, if you believe that you can't fix it, that you're just naturally disorganized, that you're artistic, that you have ADHD or any number of other excuses, if you believe that to be true, that's exactly what's going to happen. So the first thing is to change your attitude and say, I can do this, I can change. And the desire to change will come from your motivation to really want to make a difference in your life, in some other people's lives. So take away the negative attitude. The second thing is to raise your consciousness about how much clutter there really is in your life, and do it by simply, as you go through life, looking at things. When you're getting dressed in the morning, when you're looking at the mail, when you're in your kitchen, just constantly ask yourself, does this help me accomplish my work or enjoy my life? And if it doesn't, then it's clutter. And then you want to think about, what can I do to get rid of this clutter? So one of the things is to think about, what are the things that you have that maybe don't help you accomplish your work, or enjoy your life, but could someone else? So I recommend that everybody on every floor in their house have a box where they can put those things so that they can give them away to somebody else. And then the last thing is, please do not think that if you've been struggling for this for a long time, that you're going to be able to fix it by yourself. I have a coach, Darnell Jervey, who made a statement that I believe is so profound. She said, it's very difficult to see the picture when you're the frame. So I believe that in order to solve this problem, you need to find someone else who can frame it for you. So what I offer to everyone is, we have on our website, if you go to productiveenvironment.com, There's scorecards on there. You can't change what you don't measure, and we totally guarantee our services. So one of the things that we offer to people is to fill out a scorecard. We have a productive environment scorecard for individuals. You fill that scorecard out, you submit it to us, and we will do a free 30-minute discovery session, because we've looked at those thousands of times, and by answer, there's 15 questions. It'll probably take you 5 minutes to fill it out. You take 5 minutes filling it out. We talk for 30 minutes, and then we can tell you very quickly where you need to go to get started so that your office, wherever it is, can be a productive environment so you can accomplish your work and enjoy your life. And if you're not even sure what your work is, getting rid of all the clutter will really help. Trust me.
Barbara, I have one final question for you. I know that clutter and what you've talked about today, not just physical clutter and digital clutter, but especially the spiritual clutter and the emotional clutter, is life impacting. If now that people have listened to this, there was only one outcome, one message that you wanted them to hear in this last single minute, what do you want that one message of hope to be for people?
The life that you have is a result of the decisions that you are making. And tomorrow is always a new opportunity to make better decisions.
Barbara, I just love it. The title of today's program was Organizing Paper at Home. And I just have to make a plug. Yes, you do have a new book out. It is a remake of Taming the Paper Tiger. Millions of people struggle with organizational skills, and I would grant that paper is my biggest challenge. I want to thank you, Barbara, for being here, for sharing such amazing ideas, and I want to encourage all of the members of the 7-Minute Life to visit your website, productiveenvironment.com. This is Allyson Lewis with the 7-Minute Life. We're so glad you joined us for this powerful program. You can find more of these at the7minutelife.com. We hope you'll tell your friends and share this program on all of your social media outlets. It is our goal to help people improve their time management, boost their daily productivity, and organize their life so that they will have more time to live in alignment with what is truly most important to them. Welcome to the 7-Minute Life.